for May 16 through 23 with Myco Meditations and Eric Osborne. Super excited about it. This is going to be the first of many retreats we're putting together, and hopefully we get to do a bunch more with Eric. This is a psilocybin mushroom retreat, Psilocybe cubensis in particular, and we are very excited about it. It's a 7-day retreat at Treasure Beach in Jamaica in a beautiful beach resort. We are just super excited about it. All the reviews we've heard have been wonderful. We've got a lot of friends that have been down there and have given us great reviews. This will be our first time based on our conversations with all of our friends and Eric himself. We are just super excited to be part of it and can't wait to bring you psychedelic experiences on beaches in Jamaica. So check it out, and you can learn more over at mycomeditations.com. Hope you enjoy the show and hope to see you in Jamaica. Real quick commercial interruption for you. So this episode is brought to you by TransZen, a product by EntheaZen. Caitlin Thompson, who developed the product, is in our community and developed it for us by us. And it is a great product. I have found tremendous benefit from it and really have actually started to use it every single day now and plan to do so for a while. And it's great for kind of mood stabilization and for party recovery, because we're not really getting all the vitamins, minerals, and aminos that we need in our daily diet, regardless of how well you eat. It's incredibly complicated to eat well enough to get this stuff in your diet. So check it out. There's even a offer for free shipping from their site, entheozen.com/PT for psychedelics today. You get free shipping and check it out. Thanks for supporting the show, and back to it. Kyle and Joe back at you again with Psychedelics Today. Today we are here to talk about breathwork. It's a subject.
Surprised we haven't talked about it yet.
Yeah, just not enough, right? Like for how important it is to both of us, it's kind of silly that we haven't talked about it really all that often. I think we raise it a bunch so people are learning about it, but we don't ever really get into it and what it means to us, like theory and practice and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Cool. So I got into this in like 2003. I got the Groff books in 2001 and kind of dug in like crazy because I had some sneaking suspicions that reality was more than I thought it was or understood it to be. And the Groff books kind of laid out an argument that there was a lot more to the universe and to the self than traditional voices usually, let us have. And then breathwork just lets you get access to that. Yeah. Like, did you kind of bump into it in a similar way? I kind of forget how you bumped into breathwork.
I came across Groff's work when I was 19 or 20. It was after a really profound psychedelic experience, and I just had no framework to work with it. And I came across Stan's work, I think through Rick Strassman's work, and the first book I read was LSD, Doorway to the Numinous, and it really just helped put things in perspective with his theoretical framework. And after reading that, I remember I was just lifeguarding all summer and just digging into that book. And I just was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I need to figure out how I can study this. So went to Burlington College, and ironically, they had a transpersonal psychology program there, but I didn't know anything about breathwork, because I don't think in LSD, Doorway to the Numinous, Stan talks about breathwork much. It was mostly just his clinical studies on his LSD research. And so there was a 1-credit weekend workshop, and there were some folks that went to it before, and they talked about how psychedelic it was, and I was super skeptical, and I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't really believe that. And so I stumbled across it through the college, and there's the Gibsons were doing a 1-credit weekend workshop there, and I was thankful enough to jump on board and dive in that way. So I came across the Gibsons, I think, well before you wrapped up like your training and time with them. Yeah. I think you probably already moved out of the Northeast by then.
Yeah, so I was like in Utah in like 2010, I think. So yeah. I was kind of like bouncing between. I only did 1 year or less than a year there and back to the Northeast, and was pretty involved with Brian Bauer stuff at Boston Holotropic. before and after Utah. But yeah, it's just been a tremendous growing experience. Like facilitating even teaches you a ton about, who you are, how you operate in the space. And same thing with sitting. Like for a long time, sitting was even more valuable to me than the actual breathwork session itself. Maybe let's do a breakdown for folks. Like what does holotropic breathwork look like when you show up for a workshop?
Yeah, do we want to maybe go over a little bit of the background and then go over like mechanics, kind of like how we would do it during like an intro?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Also, to note, I'm just realizing this is really synchronistic that we're recording this 7 years ago. I attended my first holotropic breathwork retreat at the Gibson 7 years ago, Halloween weekend, and my first session was on the 31st on Halloween.
Oh, wow.
7 years from today, this is when I jumped right in.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this stuff comes out of LSD psychotherapy. Stan Grof did a lot of that, did a lot of research in Soviet Prague and in Maryland, and eventually it was illegal, and he had to come up with a new way to do his work, and Esalen kind of gave him a nice landing pad and place to research, and kind of bumped into all these different people practicing stuff like shamanism, yoga, different approaches to psychotherapy. And eventually he just came up with his wife, Christina, this syncretic method. It's got multiple parts, 5 parts mainly. And what am I missing? Anything there?
No, the way Lenny always talks about it was that, Stan was a scholar in residence at Esalen writing his books. And they were like, you need to start doing something around here, like do a workshop or something. And so, Christina, his wife at the time, and him developed this breathing technique. And, there was already some breathing techniques around. I mean, the yogic traditions were around. Leonard Orr developed this breathing technique called rebirthing breathwork. And his experience was sitting in a hot tub, and he was deep breathing, kind of hyperventilating. And he had this experience of reliving his birth. So, from the Western tradition, you had Leonard Orr, and then Wilhelm Reich used the breath for a while as well.
He was an early student of Freud. So that's definitely predating the hippie revolution.
Yeah. Yeah, so it wasn't like anything unique. It was just kind of putting together all these different methods and testing it out. And I think what is interesting that maybe separates a lot of the breath work, the thing that, holotropic versus, say, rebirthing breath work or whatever, is Stan's framework for working with LSD and his a lot of his clinical research. So I think that's like what is really interesting about holotropic breathwork and his work is that, when he developed it, he was witnessing people kind of relive all these sorts of experiences, transpersonal experiences, perinatal experiences, and then having this clinical research of working with LSD for, well over 1,000 couple sessions. I think it's like 2,500 sessions or something like that. And having that framework to work with when people are into non-ordinary states and realizing like, wow, there's something so similar here. People are kind of reliving these similar experiences. And supposedly that's what turned Grof onto it, was his own experience and saying, wow, that was actually really similar to a really powerful LSD experience that I had. And our teacher, Lenny, talks about that as well, saying like, I didn't really believe in the power of it until I had an experience on par with an LSD experience. And, he talked to Stan about it, and Stan was like, yeah, that's what really got me interested in it as well.
Which is really an interesting thing. The breath can be as powerful as LSD. Just take that on face value. Especially from somebody who did a ton of medical work with people and helped out a ton of people. So that's really interesting to me. And he had all these theoretical contributions like the birth perinatal matrices, which we'll probably get into in another show, and same with the COEX systems, condensed experiences. I was reading a couple passages on that in the breathwork book last night, the holotropic breathwork book, and pretty fascinating. It reframed it for me, and we can get into that later as well. But yeah, let's jump into what it looks like.
Sure. Yeah. So there's 5 basic components of like holotropic breath work. And also maybe to clarify too, that so Joe and I have been to a lot of holotropic breathwork workshops put on by the Gibsons, and so it's always kind of tricky territory that we talk about holotropic, but we're trained in transpersonal breathwork, which is what the Gibsons train people in. So yeah, just to clarify that. So like when we put on workshops, we don't do holotropic breathwork workshops, but it's kind of in the same lineage.
Yeah, it's effectively the same technique. I wouldn't say there's too much of a difference other than the teachers that gave us the skills to do what we do.
Yeah. So yeah, there's 5 components to this technique. The first is intensified breathing, evocative music, focused body work, group process, and expressive art. So the first one, intensified breathing. You know, some breathwork traditions, they have a certain type of breathing pattern. Something that I've been seeing a lot is this like 3 or 2 part breath where it's like breathe in like 3 times. So it's like, and then exhale. And then you have the Wim Hof breathing. Holotropic breathwork and transpersonal breathwork, there's really no pattern. We always say, listen to your body, let your body kind of guide the breath. But the main concept is to intensify your breathing and make these breaths very deep and circular. So there's minimal pause in between the inhale and exhale, outhale, exhale.
Yeah, and just moving as much air as you can. You know, making it not shallow like a, but making it more like a something like that. Yeah, circular breathing is what we call it. Mm-hmm. And you breathe until you're surprised.
Yeah. So the second component is evocative music. And so we play really loud music during the sessions. And to, I guess, kind of backtrack, usually when we're working within like the transpersonal breathwork realm, these sessions last around like 3 hours each. And so a person, you usually pair up with somebody. So you have a breather and sitter pair. And so we play really loud music. The set lists are around 3 hours. And it could range, your breathing session could range anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. And so it usually has a trajectory. I know the GTT, the Groff Transpersonal Training, I think has different words for the way that they break up the music. The way Lenny has described it to us, there's the first stage is usually like an activation stage where it's kind of fast-paced, drumming, tribal music to kind of get the breath going. And then it would move into a crisis phase where it's more emotional. It's kind of, kind of listening, like emotional responses and kind of out there. I usually like think of it as like weird, trippy space music or just kind of dark tones. And then conversion, which is more kind of like theatrical, helping you wrap up and almost moving into like a resolution. And then the last one would be resolution, where it's really kind of calm, waves crashing, nature sounds, just calm meditation, bells ringing. My favorite is probably the conversion. It's always like happy, but really emotional. And I usually end up crying a lot during that time.
Yeah, I think you did pretty good there. I would say we just try not to have music with English words in it, or if somebody's like a native Portuguese speaker and not Portuguese words, stuff like that. And if it's electronic music, have it be kind of more organic sounding, like not just, laser beams shooting all over. And then, oh, come on, I had something. Nope. That's it. Oh, broad spectrum audio. So hit all the high ends and low ends of the frequency range. So it's like think classical music versus like an American folk singer with just a guitar and words. Yeah, I think that's it for music.
Cool. And then usually towards the end of the session, as you're coming to wrap up and resolve, there might still be some like stuck physical and emotional energy in the body. And so people can feel cramped, they can feel tension in different places. And this is when we would start to ask people about how they're feeling and start a process of body work if people are open to it. So that's the third component is focused body work. And so, some people that are really new to this, we might not engage in it too much. For new people, they can usually get this like a tingling sensation in their hands or cramping, which is called tetany. And towards the end, that can be really helpful if people are still feeling tingling or cramping in the hands. And there's usually two types of body work that we can do. The first is like applying resistance. So if there's, say, tension in the hands and there's cramping, as a facilitator, we would place our hands against the participant's hand and tell them to focus on that pain or that tension or the tingling feeling, breathe into it, focus on it, and then they would push against us and we would just apply some resistance. So we're not really doing too much besides applying resistance. And that gives the participant more power to work through it, as I see it. Like they have it, it's an active type of body work where they have the power. And when we're engaging in body work like that, the only word that we respond to is no. Or stop, sorry. Yeah, stop. Some people could sit there and scream at us and tell us to get off of them. We would typically kind of see that as psychic material arising, especially if somebody might have had like an abuse background and they're kind of reliving that. So the magic word is stop. Then the other type of body work, as Elizabeth says, like errors of omission. And so that really entails, say, if you were abandoned or weren't held as a child, as you're wrapping up, there could be those feelings of abandonment there. And all you really just want is to be held or your hand held or somebody to sit there by you and place their hand on your chest or on your head. And so that can be really healing and comforting to help resolve any of those type of issues.
It could be something as minor as like something scary happened and you didn't have anybody around to like hold your hand or give you a hug or something. One time could have left an imprint that sticks around till you're older, for sure. Yeah. What Kyle was talking about was when the music's going and you're breathing, stuff gets activated. Your things in your system that carry a psychic charge can get activated. Typically, I like to model it as the thing that carries the strongest charge in your subconscious is the thing that comes up first. And hopefully you get to expel some of the energy from that system of constellation of things, and other systems can then take dominance and you could feel happy for a while. And, the best case scenario is that those kind of negative thought systems or coexes get resolved.
Yeah. And to point out that with that highly charged emotional energy or psychic energy material, whatever you want to call it, Stan talks about this inner healing intelligence and also this concept of an inner radar. When we access these non-ordinary states, the inner radar of our being kind of picks that up, could be the body, and it brings it to the surface looking to be healed.
Yeah, it's I like to say, it's the same mechanism that heals, well, in a sense, that heals your actual wounds. And that's what this stuff really is. It's a way to heal these wounds that you're carrying into your life. And what we're really doing is setting the stage for healing. The same way you would with a wound, you're going to clean out the dirt and, whatever the dog bite left behind and not let it fester.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was actually, when I was at the MDMA training, Annie Mithofer talked a lot about that. how the body has a natural tendency to move towards healing. And so as a doctor, you would clean the cut out and maybe stitch up a cut, and then the body's like mechanism just heals itself. So, breath work and psychedelics is kind of like setting that stage, maybe fostering that healing to happen naturally.
Groff posits about hyperventilation, that hyperventilation is like a self-healing response. As horrifying as it is, it's our body saying, okay, if I hyperventilate, I can get into these states and deal with this stuff right now. For many thousands of years, human history did not have psychiatrists. So, the human body had to figure out a way to compensate for these things. And that's our natural reaction, is hyperventilation inside a panic attack. And as horrifying as it is, maybe you only have to do it twice or 3 times and then you're done.
Yeah.
Who knows? We don't really have much data on that.
I might want to jump into the idea of hyperventilation a little bit later.
Okay.
Because this video that I watched, a lot of people were commenting and it got me really curious. So, but let's finish up
those
some
two
of the
nerds,
components.
the mythical...
Yeah.
Dude, yeah. Okay. Let's wrap this up and then we'll talk about that.
All right, cool. So then the fourth component is group process. And so that really entails, as Lenny always likes to state, we're the descendants of very successful tribes. And then so to come into a group, share our experiences, it really adds a whole layer and like a whole different element to the healing experience. Like I've done like private sessions of breath work, like kind of short, not 3-hour long ones, but maybe like an hour. But having that group process there is I think it's so important. And actually, I've been reading this book, The Neuroscience of Human Relationships by Louis Kozlany. I don't know how to say his last name. Oh man, it's so interesting. Like his whole thing talks about like the human brain being a social organ and how like we need all this connection, and actually the brain, like that's probably why like we've developed such high complex brains with the neocortex and all this, is that it's really just a social function. Like we need each other, and I don't know, I'm hoping to maybe incorporate a lot more of that stuff when I talk about group process in my intros and whatnot.
Yeah, I would like to read that book. That sounds really interesting. Yeah, I'd almost call it like a social sexual organ too. Yeah. Because those are like circuits that I don't think we talk about enough. And, given Freud, Reich, and others, like sex is super important to the human psyche, and we have to figure that shit out. Otherwise, it can leave us quite vulnerable.
Yeah.
But yeah, the group process is so cool. I love going to workshops and just really deeply connecting with people. It's been a huge portion of my self-development, I think, because it's kind of like ad hoc mentor relationships, almost like peer support. And it's so cool because people are all different ages, have been through all sorts of different shit, and can give you some feedback and help you be a little bit more courageous in your day-to-day.
Yeah, and the community building is, I think, one of the best parts about it. Like when I go to like a weekend workshop and just being there, I mean, it feels like coming home sometimes, just being in like a big family that's so nurturing and supportive.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm willing to fly across the country sometimes to be a part of it.
Yeah. Anything else on that you want to touch on?
Not really, but one of our friends, our mutual friends, said that, breathwork wasn't so much more about the breathing or like psychedelic healing, but it was more about relaxing into group process or something. I thought that was a really interesting way of phrasing it. I saw it as kind of like a negative comment, but you helped me understand that it was like, no, this is actually a really nice thing, because the group is such an integral part, and it's not necessarily a part of psychedelic work. It's not a part of MDMA therapy, really. It'd be very interesting if MDMA therapy could open up into like a group process. I don't know how we would do that well, but I think that would be really fascinating.
Well, I think we might be moving there. I mean,
that's right. You did talk about the AIDS the AIDS peer support thing in San Fran.
Gabby, I think, is starting some research with psilocybin and group work. And then I was listening to a podcast. I forget whose podcast it was, but Annie and Michael Mithofer were on there, and they were talking about hopefully like some group work with MDMA in the future. They were talking about, maybe future potentials of how they would want to see this medicine used. And I think it's huge. After digging into this book on the neuroscience of human relationships, like I'm thinking like a whole different way about what group process means, and like it's really interesting.
I would love to get my hands on that book when you're done.
Yeah.
So let's talk about art, expressive drawing.
Yeah, you want to drive that one a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I consider the art phase super important because it's a nice way to pre-verbally express your experience. It's like your subconscious sending you a message that you're expressing, because you haven't really talked yet, hopefully, and you want to put down as much as you can on paper that can then steer your conversation and sharing later. I just kind of fall back into this concept of like Jungian sand play or free expression from Freud. And, these are things that are still happening. Like, what's that called? The ink blot test.
The
Rorschach ink blot. Yeah. So like those kind of things, it's all similar. It's kind of free association. It gives you a chance to do some play, which is a little bit regressive, which can help you, get some stuff out. You're really getting stuff out on paper, literally. And then when you finish, you can then take that to the group and kind of guide your sharing to the group according to that. Somebody go, what does that purple mean to you? Or that circle looks a little funny. What does that mean to you? And it's really neat. And it kind of bleeds over really nicely into the group process stuff, because the art and the sharing, art is a way of sharing. Art is a way of communicating, and it's a kind of a nice, booster into the sharing space. Because sometimes you just come out and you go, that was so outrageous or crazy that I have no idea how to say words about that thing. And the drawing could help you. And so people aren't scared. It can be anything from a stick figure to color patches to a really fancy drawing. You don't have to have skill as an artist to do this well.
Yeah, and a lot of people are kind of like intimidated by the art because they might not necessarily think they're great at it. And it's really not about that. It's about getting your experience down on paper, whether it could just be like, just little swirls of color or this or that. And actually, in our Navigating Psychedelics course, we have Lenny Gibson on there talking about the importance of the mandala. And he has a really fascinating story about a mandala that he did and then kind of foreshadowing something in the future. So he had a medical condition come up like years later. And, Elizabeth said, hey, you should really go look at that mandala. There's a lot of similarity there. And it's a really fascinating story. And he was saying that, it's like my body knew in advance, and it just kind of expressed itself through the mandala. And so that's why, and we always talk about, going back to the mandala, looking at the symbology of it. Symbology or symbolism? I always get screwed
I've heard
up.
it both ways.
Boondock Saints, where they get into that.
Really?
Yeah,
I'll have to watch that again. That's great.
I forget what it is. Like this. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. But it's interesting. So going back to your mandala and just looking at it and seeing how to make meaning out of it, and if anything still resonates.
Yeah, it's huge. Like I was saying earlier, it's almost like your body, your psyche is sending messages to you. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what it sounded like in Lenny's story that you can hear elsewhere. It's pretty fascinating that we have a method available to us where this kind of thing can happen. It would be really nice if we could just say, okay, I would like to check the box and get that experience. That might help out people who, are really overwhelmed thinking they have cancer all the time. That's apparently a real condition I learned about hypochondriaism? Yeah, I guess. But, just thinking you have cancer all the time, maybe you don't even have symptoms. You're just paranoid you have cancer. Which I have lumps all over me all the time. So I'm like feeling my face going, oh shit. So I could be one of those people, but it would be nice theoretically if you could say, okay, I would like to know if I have cancer in this breathwork session, do a body scan. I don't think we're there yet, but
right.
maybe in 4 decades.
Do we want to jump in a little bit about the sitter thing really quick? Because people always have questions about that.
Yeah, let's do it. I think the sitting role is tremendously important. It is where you kind of pair up into a sitter-breather pair. Sometimes it's a triad for an odd number of reasons. And you're kind of there just to take care of the person, make sure they don't punch the ground, get water if they need it, get tissues when they need it so they don't have to open their eyes. They can spend more time in the actual process, and you're helping them, stay more comfortable for those 3 hours, up to 3 hours. Well, sometimes it's even longer, but yeah, those kind of things can happen, and even walk you to the bathroom. Because the biggest problem that you can have happen to you in a breathwork session is that you fall over and hit your head. So you want to minimize those risks, which is why we lay down, don't stand up, and you get help when you have to walk to the bathroom. There's something about accelerated breathing that makes you have to pee more. So even though you think you might not have to pee, you might have to pee a couple times, which sucks, but it's just the way it is for now. I think it's something to do with the acidity or alkaline. I don't know.
I think so. Yeah. It's like flushing your body out.
So it's a super cool role because you actually get to be a direct witness to somebody experiencing the extraordinary oftentimes, which is super amazing. I have had a lot of really cool friendships pop up that way. Just like, okay, you weren't that close beforehand, but afterwards you were there for that person and you did some really interesting stuff together and hopefully really helpful stuff together. I know there's some students on the class and friends we've made doing breath work that, us sitting for them was like a big deal, both ways. And it really helped you connect. I don't know. What are your thoughts on sitting?
I think it's such a powerful experience just to sit, because when do you actually get to sit for somebody for 3 hours while they go through an experience like that? It's really profound. And then on the flip side for the breather, to just have somebody there witness your experience and know that you're like in a really safe place. And Stan originally didn't develop it having sitters. He would just have everybody lay in a circle and breathe. And it came to be that like he ended up hurting his back and couldn't do body work. So he just ended up doing a sitter pair. And so it kind of just originated out of that. But I think it's such a I sometimes have like a bigger emotional release sitting in some sense. Maybe I'm not like flailing around on the ground like screaming, but just that like empathetic feeling and like the knot in my throat and the tears that come up just to watch people go through their process. It's really something else.
Hey everybody, Joe here. This podcast is brought to you by EntheaZen. We want to feature their product TransZen. It is great, and I've been taking it daily for a while now. I think it's a wonderful product, and we want to have more of you guys try it out. We've partnered with them to get you free shipping, so check them out at entheazen.com/PT to get your Psychedelics Today free shipping offer. Yeah, I think I've only kind of cried a handful of times as a sitter. But yeah, I see a lot of people do that because it's, it's kind of beautiful, or it is beautiful. It is the human body, like kind of doing some stuff, expressing the human soul or psyche, in very interesting ways. And it's really, really interesting. So maybe let's get into some personal experiences. I'll do 2 really quick. My very first session was a little bit boring, a little bit left on the table to be experienced. I had disappeared into the void after maybe an hour and a half of really intense tetany, which is carpal muscle spasms, your hands clamping up, a lot of tingly. Sometimes you get a really numb face. It's a very common reaction. It's not called TEMI. It's not called TEMI. We'll get into that in a moment. And then near the end of the experience, I had this sensation or feeling as though there's this enormous black snake like right below the surface. I couldn't really sense it. It was like in the shadows, and I had like a light view into the shadows, and that was really symbolic to me. And right at the very end, my kind of fingers lit up with like Sanskrit letters on them. I'd never noted those down, what they were. I did not and do not know Sanskrit. So I just had been studying a fair amount of Indian philosophy, and that kind of impacted it. And so years later, my most intense experience lasted 5 hours, and it was all about like the male-female dynamic of the planet, being shameful of being a male, just really pessimistic about the future of the planet. The planet is burning was kind of the fundamental thing, which kind of ties back to the Swedenborg vision of the planet being on fire, which is interesting. Maybe I tapped into the same thing temporarily. And then, I was flying through the cosmos, sliding down this female tongue with the rest of the world being like male and on fire, sliding down this cool, wet thing. And it was a harrowing experience, and it lasted so long. I think I was in the midst of a bad relationship at the time, so that didn't help. It might have been a great catalyst, though, for this experience, which I'm very thankful for. So I'm not upset about it. But coming out, it probably took me 2 weeks to really kind of like get a grip and like bring it back. Lenny came out. He saw how like frazzled I was on my way home, like, totally in the dumps, going, oh, fuck, now I have to go back to work, and everything's still going to be fucked up, and the world's going to die, blah, blah, blah. And he's going, just courage. He just said courage to me a couple times. And then he used Panaria. Who was that? Everything Flows. I think it was early Greek philosopher. I should know this. Anyway, it was like the first major, really great Greek wisdom. It was like all is change, effectively. So it's like all is change and courage. And I was like, okay, I'll work on that. And I did. It worked out great, I think. Still not exactly where I want to be, but I'm at least a functional human with agency.
Nice.
Yeah, anything you want to share?
I think I've shared a lot about my first experience on the show before.
Yeah, you have.
So maybe I won't get into that. It might be repetitive for some folks, but there was one experience. So, and I think it stresses the importance of body work. And so it was during this time I was just feeling like super stressed, and I started to do the breathing, and nothing happened. And I was probably about like an hour. I don't know. I guess I had like some strong physical stuff in the beginning, and movement and energy, and that was fun and fine. And then it was just like nothing was really going on. And so I was kind of frustrated, and I was like, like this is a waste of time. And I thought I was wrapped up. And Brian came over to me and was like, what's going on? And I was like, I think I'm done. Like, I'm not really having anything go on. Like, I just want to like head out and do my mandala. And, as we normally do in these workshops, we're really hesitant when somebody's wrapped up after an hour and a half. We're like, maybe sit back and pay attention to your body. So, he really asked me to focus on my body. And I was like, well, there is like a lot of tension around my neck. And, so he grabbed a towel and gently placed it on my neck. And it's like, actually, I don't even know if he placed it on my neck. It was like kind of hovering above my neck. And for whatever reason, that just set me off. And I grabbed the towel and I placed it against my neck. And all of a sudden, like this whole kind of world opened up, where I watched this snake wrap around the earth, and the earth was like a head, and there was like a body under it, and this snake was just like constricting the earth, suffocating everything. And at that time, I was like just really struggling with this job I was at. And there was part of me that wanted to leave, but I felt really tied to it because the manager was my roommate. And it was just like all these weird interpersonal things where I'm like, I can't just jump ship because then it's just going to cause all these complex things. And I was like, damn it. Like, I feel like my world is being constricted right now. There's just all these like weird kind of like pressures everywhere. And as I worked through it, I wrapped up about, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, like the boss gave us all a letter with our paycheck and gave us a 1 week's notice and decided to close up the business. And I was just like, well, I guess that worked itself. And so like whenever I think about this, of like the importance of body work and when you start engaging in this work, I just always think you're messing with some weird time wave continuum. Like, it was just so strange. I was so stressed out about this, and then all of a sudden it was just like, okay, like done. And I was like, well, how did that happen?
That's interesting. I think there is something to it. Like we're all embedded in these waves, and they're mysterious. We don't know anything about them, but there's something else. And sometimes we can get hints of the future. Like Groff talks about it. Lenny, I think, disagrees with future stuff, but he doesn't disagree about past stuff. But right. I think in a sense though, there is this higher dimensionality that is hard to account for. And I don't know none of us really know exactly what it is, but there is something really strange about time. And I think we're going to learn more about it in the coming years, for sure. But the transpersonal dimension, for sure, there's something there about your, potential past lives, potentially being informed also by birth trauma or not even birth trauma, just your birth process and being gestated. Like, those things can really inform what pops up.
Yeah, I mean, I even had another experience where like I was reliving this experience, my mother like giving me birth, as weird as that sounds, and just crying, and like the whole time I was like, man, I really wish like my mom could experience something like this so I could have a conversation with her. And I mean, what happened next is a longer story in itself, which a whole bunch of dreams involved and this and that. But anyways, a couple months later, my mom like called me. She's like, my friend wants me to go to this breathing thing up at Kripalu. Yeah. And I was like, oh, interesting. She's like, yeah. She's like, you do some type of breath work, don't you? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, is it with a guy named Stan Groff? She's like, yeah, it sounds really familiar. She's like, I think that's it. And I was just like, you got to go. Like, you have to go. And she went, and it totally opened up a totally new world. And it was just so weird. Like, the whole session, I was just crying. It's like, my mom needs to experience this. And like, not having any conversation with her about it, really. Like, a couple months later, she just called me and was like, yeah, this opportunity, like, my friend wants me to go. And I was like, weird. It's so weird how this happens.
Yeah, it's super awesome. There's definitely something to it. What the hell book was it? There's some book, Gary Zukov maybe wrote it. It's kind of like a, typical kind of hippie book coming out of the human potential movement. It was really cool. Dancing Woolly Master was one of them. I don't remember what the other one was called, but it talked about these like kind of group souls in a sense. Like, we're most closely bonded to our family. So it's likely we're going to have experiences around our family in these states, and then maybe with our, town or like racial identity or something, and then with our country, and then with the world, and hopefully with the universe. It's kind of like, Russian nesting dolls, and our even genetic closeness to something could, this is kind of a Rupert Sheldrake thing, could give us some sort of psychic affinity to these other folks that are similar.
Yeah. Are you talking about like Sheldrake with a morphogenetic field?
Yeah.
Theory?
Is it morphogenetic or morphogenic? I think it is genetic. Morphogenic.
Morphogenic? I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? But so a really simple way of putting it would be like you're in a family, a multi-generational family of skiers that are really, really good skiers. It's going to be easier for you to become a really good skier than somebody who has no family. Probably from a larger sampling, because you're going to get those Michael Jordans who have no background, Well, Michael Jordan skiing. That's a funny analogy. Yeah, so you're going to have those people that, come out of nowhere in our rocket ships, but there's going to be those other folks who, just the general population who are going to like revert to the mean, whereas you and your family might be outside that kind of statistical thing. That's kind of a way of putting it in Sheldrake's world.
Yeah.
Yeah, so breathwork. I don't know, man. I think this is just a magical system that's been tremendously helpful for me. I've seen it be really helpful for others. I know there's a lot of psychiatrists involved in the movement. It comes from a psychiatrist. There, to me, isn't really enough clinical data. I don't think on breathwork. It would be really cool if there was, because then doctors could talk about this.
I think there's some really interesting stuff coming from Wim Hof. I mean, he's got a lot of science backing up some of his technique, which I'm really interested in digging more into.
Yeah, same here. My problem with Wim is that he's the way he's talking about what's happening isn't necessarily scientifically accurate yet. I'm sure he's going to get there. It's like, no, you're not hyperoxygenating your body. That's not what's happening.
Right, because like in the I think from Groff's theory, you're actually eliminating carbon dioxide out of the blood, which I guess that would make it more oxygenated. Well,
your body has an auto-regulation.
Alkaline.
Your body has an auto-regulation system to keep it at a normal. Like you're already kind of 99 to 100% saturated in the blood, like almost all the time. Like when you get a measurement, it's like if it's not 100%, something might be wrong. So you're kind of already there. And the stuff he says about DMT, I don't know that we can categorically say that yet. Like this is the DMT breath, and we're having DMT experiences from breath. It's like, maybe.
Oh, Wim Hof mentions that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Apparently this is one of his more secret I don't even know how to advanced techniques you get once you start like studying with him. It's like, it's cool, but it's not, I just want people to be more careful with language around this stuff. Like we did this panel the other day in Denver, and one of the presenters, Becca Williams, was kind of talking a lot about the nadi system in the body, meridians, and I'm like, I don't feel comfortable talking about this as part of my work. If it comes up spontaneously in the session for somebody, cool, but I'm not going to have you do certain interventions to like leverage that yet, because this technique works great already.
I think that's like what I like about like this lineage is that it's pretty non-directive, hands off, and like I don't think there's much of a besides like some of the perinatal theories and transpersonal theories, like there's not much of a like you're clearing out this chakra or you're working with this, and not much of like a dogma, I would say. Right.
Cool. So I think we got a wrap for now. Anything you want to throw in as a last minute?
Hopefully people can check out Breathwork. I did want to dive in a little bit about that video, but I know we're running out of time and have something else lined up right now. Maybe we can, do something later about that.
Briefly, if you see videos online of people talking about holotropic breathwork, there's a really good chance they are not talking about holotropic breathwork and they are mistaken. And they might be misrepresenting what's going on.
Yeah, okay. So this video is two guys talking about tripping out using breath, and they just had a facilitator come in, and it was more of like a two-part breathing, and they were describing it as like holotropic breathwork. But then at the end they said, they've kind of altered it, but it was really breathing into the chakras, and it was just there was a lot of like interesting comments on the thread about hypoxia and like how hyperventilation can do brain damage and this and that. So it seemed like it's like really cultivated some negativity in the threads and concerns with people. But I don't know. It was just a really interesting video, and part of me was just laughing.
Yeah, right. It's crazy. Yeah, and I looked her up. She's not a holotropic breathwork facilitator. I don't think she ever said she was. It was the hosts of the video. So maybe if we're feeling brave, we'll link to it in the comments here. You guys can check it out.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again soon. Hey everybody, Joe here. Thanks for listening to this episode. Quick commercial break for you. We are sponsored now by TransZen, a product from EntheoZen. Caitlin Thompson, who's a member of the psychedelic community, runs events in San Diego, developed this pretty much for herself, and she uses it every day. I now use it every day. I think Kyle as well. And it's a really cool product that fills in a lot of our nutritional gaps. A lot of our behavior and moods come from your diet, your gut biome, and a lot of other factors. But something we can easily control is our nutrition. And this supplement fills out a lot of vitamin, mineral, and amino acids that can really contribute to feeling better. It includes dopamine precursors, serotonin precursors, a lot of B vitamins at reasonable doses, not anything crazy. It's not like you're going overboard. And it's just a really nice product. I've found that it's really lowered my day-to-day stress. So like the peak stress I would experience with my day job, it's substantially lower now. And using it as a recovery aid after partying, that is for sure a great use case as well. She used to make a product called, or she's still making it and selling it, but called Weekend Warrior, and TransZen is effectively Weekend Warrior 2. And it's not just for partying anymore. It's for day-to-day stuff, and it's great for us in the psychedelic community. A lot of us are using psychedelics to feel better, and if we don't use them regularly enough, sometimes you feel cranky. Perhaps that's because of gut biome stuff or nutritional deficiencies in some really niche areas like B6. And I wholeheartedly endorse it. That's why I've decided to work with Caitlin as a sponsor, and really excited to see where this goes. So check it out, TransZen from EntheoZen, entheozen.com, ENTHEO zen.com. Go to entheozen.com/PT, and you can get a special deal of free shipping. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Kyle and I decided to raise some funds using Patreon, which is a really cool way to support the show, because you can choose to donate a small portion of money monthly for certain prizes. We are allowing you guys access to interviews before they will ever hit the web. So for instance, this Horizons episode, they've had that for a few days, and I believe there's some panel discussion stuff we've recorded and made available there. You'll probably also have access to some member or patron only webinars. We also have rewards including t-shirts, stickers, mugs, access to our Navigating Psychedelics class, and much more. So check it out, patreon.com/psychedelics today, or you can get a link from our site, psychedelics.com.